Welcome to Breast Cancer Breakthroughs. Advances in breast cancer care does not always mean new drugs. This can also mean optimizing our currently available treatments. For a long time, using what is known as the maximum tolerated dose of a drug has been the status quo for treating breast cancer. But now, researchers are identifying ways to optimize treatment dosage to limit side effects for patients, with the goal of improving treatment adherence and improving outcomes. Different strategies are being tested in clinical trials to right-size treatments for patients, which means achieving the maximum efficacy but the minimum amount of side effects. In this episode of Breast Cancer Breakthroughs, we speak with Komen Scholar alumni Dr. Julie Gralow, along with medical oncologist Dr. Erica Mayer, who explains in more detail what we know about right-sizing treatment. They also discuss some clinical trials that are testing how different dosing strategies impact treatment adherence, quality of life, and outcomes for patients. Dr. Gralow started off by telling us how treatment dosing is traditionally determined.
Historically, the dose that's moved forward as the drug is going through the evaluation and registration process has been based on maximal tolerated dose, meaning we would take a chemotherapy drug, a cytotoxic drug, and we would test it in a small number of patients and keep upping the dose until the point that it wasn't tolerable anymore. And because chemotherapy works on rapidly dividing cells, it made sense that you would push it to the limit to get the maximal effect on dividing cells. And so that MTD, we call it, maximal tolerated dose, has traditionally, historically, been the way that we defined dose. We're in a fairly new era of precision medicine right now in oncology. And that means that we've been able to identify targets that are part of what has taken this normal cell and become abnormal and allowed that cell to grow and divide, when it shouldn't be. And so we now know many of these targets. And when you look at targeted therapies that are designed to hit a specific gene alteration or a specific protein alteration, you might need just very low doses to shut down that gene or that protein, and that don't necessarily cause a lot of side effects. So this maximum tolerated dose just goes out the window. What you really want to do is see what is a dose that's shutting down that pathway, that's allowing the cell to behave like a cancer. So precision oncology means hitting the target, shutting it down, and you can usually do that at much lower doses than doses that cause lots of toxicity and side effects.
The U.S. Food and Drug Administration, or the FDA, is the federal agency that determines whether a drug's benefits outweigh its potential risks. It oversees how a drug will be given, including dosing, to make sure that the drug is safe and effective. Dr. Gralow discussed how the FDA is addressing dose optimization for drugs that are currently being developed and for older drugs that are already widely used.
The FDA has a lot of interest in this. They have two projects. One is called Project Optimus, which has instruction for companies that are developing drugs for how to define dose in a way that would randomize early on, not just push it to maximum tolerated dose. So they're calling it Project Optimus, trying to get the optimal dose. They also have a project called Project Renewal. I love all these names that the FDA has for projects. Project Renewal is to take old drugs that are already approved at a dose, but in practice and in subsequent trials, we've realized that lower doses are effective. And in several cases, they've changed the FDA label and lowered the dose for a couple of important oncology drugs as part of Project Renewal.
In addition to the FDA, the broader breast cancer research field is interested in dose optimization. Dr. Gralow discussed two clinical trials that have taken different approaches to help to identify treatment doses that lead to optimal treatment efficacy while minimizing side effects for patients.
One of those trials that's recently reported in breast cancer is called the AMALEE trial, and it is taking a look at a class of drugs we call CDK4/6 inhibitors. These are drugs that are commonly used in treating hormone receptor positive breast cancer. And they're also drugs that in practice we're frequently reducing the dose because of side effects, things like a low white count or fatigue or things like that. So the AMALEE trial took a look at one of these CDK4/6 inhibitors, a drug called ribociclib, and it compared two different doses, the full FDA approved dose, 600 milligrams for 2 weeks on 1 week off versus 400 milligrams. And the way the trial was designed, it wasn't a big trial. It had less than 400 patients, and it was what we call it, a non-inferiority trial. It was looking to see if the 400 milligram dose was not inferior to the 600 milligram dose. Now, we learned a lot of important things through this trial. The conclusion was that they couldn't definitively say that 400 milligrams was the same in terms of response rate as 600. It was close, but with all the statistics and the small-ish number of patients, they weren't able to show that. But it was close. And what they did show was that the amount of time that the tumor was under control was similar, and that the side effects were markedly reduced. So while the conclusion of that trial technically, statistically, was that they couldn't say that, yes, we've shown you absolutely, you can start with 400 milligrams and not the full 600 milligrams, what it showed was unquestionably the side effects were less. And in the big scheme of things, even though it didn't meet statistics, it was very close in terms of the effect on the tumor. So that was an interesting and important trial. We also have an ongoing trial that we're running at ASCO, the American Society of Clinical Oncology, which is my society, and it's funded by the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, PCORI. We're calling it our CDK study. We're looking at both ribociclib, the one in the AMALEE trial, and we're looking at palbociclib, one of the first cousins of ribociclib. And we're looking in the metastatic breast cancer setting, and we're looking at an older population, women 65 and older, because this was a group in all the trials that we've done of these drugs. And in real world evidence, these drugs have been approved for many years, so we know what's happening in practice. We know that especially in an older population, they're, one, being started at a lower dose. Two, if they're started at a high dose, they're frequently being dose reduced because of side effects. And three, sometimes patients aren't even having these drugs used at all because of the fear of side effects if we start at the high dose. So what we're looking at in this study is, it's an interesting design. It's different from the AMALEE trial because we're not directly comparing two different doses. We're comparing a strategy of start at the FDA approved dose of these two drugs. You get to pick which drug and what you're combining it with, but start at the FDA approved dose, but then reduce the dose as it's not tolerated. Okay, that's what's commonly done in practice, versus a randomization to start at a low dose and then only escalate it, only increase the dose if it is tolerated. So we'll get to that steady state, the dose that the patient is able to tolerate sooner in this way. And we are hoping we won't have a lot of dropouts. And what we're looking at in the end is the time until these drugs, these CDK4/6 inhibitors, are discontinued, time to treatment discontinuation. So it's a very interesting concept. One is you start high and you reduce if not tolerated. The other is start low and you only increase if tolerated, because patients can be on these drugs for years and years and years. And we want to get to that dose that they're going to be able to tolerate sooner without causing a lot of side effects. So it's a very interesting trial design. It's ongoing, and we're really excited about a very unique trial design that is all about having maximum impact on the cancer and the minimum impact on the patient.
We are following this closely and will share the results of the CDK study as soon as they become available. Next, we spoke with Dr. Erica Mayer, who discussed a clinical trial examining dose optimization of a different CDK4/6 inhibitor called abemaciclib.
About 10 years ago, back in 2015, we had the first CDK4/6 inhibitors approved. And at this point in time, we have 3 agents currently approved for use in the United States for metastatic breast cancer. If something works for advanced disease, we want to bring it earlier on into the early breast cancer setting to see if introducing the new therapy will improve our ability to treat early stage breast cancer and hopefully improve our ability to cure early stage breast cancer. And so a number of clinical trials were started using the available agents in the early stage setting. One of the most important trials is a study called monarchE. And this is a study using the CDK4/6 inhibitor abemaciclib. And abemaciclib is a pill medicine. It's a CDK4/6 inhibitor that patients take twice a day continuously in combination with endocrine treatment. In the monarchE study, eligible patients had a diagnosis of hormone receptor positive, HER2 negative breast cancer that was node positive, so it had gotten into the regional lymph nodes and met criteria to be somewhat higher risk disease. This is a global trial. It was open all around the world. It enrolled 5,600 patients, and the patients who entered the trial were randomized to either add 2 years of the medicine abemaciclib to their ongoing endocrine therapy or just have ongoing endocrine therapy. And the results from this study, which have now been presented several times, most recently updated at the ESMO 2025 conference, demonstrate that patients who received the 2 years of abemaciclib not only had an improvement in helping prevent cancer from coming back, and this has been shown very consistently over the 7 years that the study's been monitored, but also for the first time showing that patients who received the abemaciclib actually are living longer than patients who did not. So that's a huge finding and very much supports the use of abemaciclib in the early stage setting. So not long after the original reports from monarchE, abemaciclib became approved, and we began offering this to patients in the adjuvant setting. So this has all been great, and we're so grateful for treatment advances that in particular can make a difference in the lives of our patients. Importantly, though, abemaciclib, even though this is not a chemotherapy medicine, it does have side effects. One of the most prominent side effects has been diarrhea, which tends to occur fairly early on in treatment, often in the first several weeks, and over time does get better. The body accommodates to it a bit. But in the monarchE trial, it was noted that a fairly substantial number of patients struggled with diarrhea, requiring either adjusting the dose, lowering the dose, or even leading to patients having to stop the medicine early. And we try really hard to avoid that because if patients stop early, they may not get that benefit that we're looking for from the medication. So I became interested in thinking about, are there other ways we could look at dosing the abemaciclib? We do have experiences in patients with metastatic breast cancer in trials where we've looked at starting low and gradually increasing, and those have been successful in helping improve tolerability and helping reduce the emergence of toxicity. So we designed a trial called the TRADE study, which is a single-arm phase 2 trial that we ran at Dana-Farber and at our regional sites that enrolled patients who otherwise we would be offering abemaciclib. They met criteria to get abemaciclib, but instead of starting it at the standard dose, which is 150 milligrams twice a day, we started people at a low dose, 50 milligrams twice a day, and patients took that for 2 weeks. As long as that was going well without any major side effects, we increased to 100 milligrams twice a day for 2 weeks. And then as long as that was going well, at the beginning of the second month, we increased to the standard dose, 150 milligrams twice a day, onward for the planned 2-year course. When we designed the study, what we were looking at was to see if this gradual introduction of the medication would improve a composite endpoint, which was looking at how many patients could reach the target dose, could maintain the target dose, and importantly, could stay on abemaciclib without discontinuation. So overall, TRADE was a positive study. We saw that using this dose escalation showed us that at the moment we were going to look at the primary endpoint, 12 weeks, that there was fewer patients, significantly fewer, had either stopped medicine or couldn't get to that target dose compared to what was seen in the larger monarchE study. And so importantly, at 12 weeks, only about 6% of patients had stopped abemaciclib, meaning 93% of people were still able to take their medication, which I think is really important because, again, we want people to get the benefit from the drug, and we want people to be able to get that comfortably. And so we're very happy with these results, and we feel like these are very clinically meaningful and results that doctors and patients can take into clinic and use this in practice. So we hope that strategies like what we studied in TRADE, using these gradual introductions of medications, could also be extended to other oral therapies, some of our other novel cancer therapies that are in development that do have risks of side effects, so we can try to improve tolerability across the board.
If you want to learn more about how CDK4/6 inhibitors work with hormone therapy to stop breast cancer from growing, check out the video we linked below. So we've heard about clinical trials that are testing dosing strategies to minimize side effects, but this research depends on patients reporting their side effects to their clinical team. Dr. Mayer discussed the importance of timely communication of all side effects in more detail.
It's really important when people are getting cancer therapies, whether it's standard of care or on a clinical trial, that there's really good communication with the treatment team. I think it's important to know that everyone has a very much shared goal in the care of people with cancer, which is we want people to do as well as possible, to live as long as possible, to feel as good as possible, and we don't want people to get sick unnecessarily. We have huge teams of people who take care of cancer patients, including folks you meet, such as doctors, nurses, and other sort of support people. But there's a lot of behind the scenes folks who do a lot of work looking after cancer patients and checking in. And I would add to that oncology pharmacists. Sometimes these are people who you might speak to on the phone, but sometimes there are people way behind the scenes who are checking doses, checking safety, checking for drug-drug interactions. And as a patient, one might never meet them or speak to them, but they know you and they're watching you. And so, there's a huge safety net to make sure that people are very safe. The thing is, if someone's having a side effect and they're not sharing it with a member of the team, then we can't maximize safety. And then those are situations where people, have risk of getting sick or, risk of getting in trouble with medicines. Often, many of the side effects that someone might experience, if they're heard about early and managed early, they can be nipped in the bud and they'll go away, or they may not become a big issue. So I really want to stress the importance of communicating with the team and, having a lot of confidence and security that the team is looking out for you and wants everything in your best interest.
Finally, Dr. Mayer shared her thoughts on why it is so important not just to discover new treatments, but to improve how these treatments we have are given to patients.
When we think about cancer research and the important types of research that is performed and that we support, certainly one of the biggest priorities is identifying new medicines, bringing them into clinic, establishing how well they work, and trying to get them to the point to be newly approved therapies. I think that's always our very traditional and high priority paradigm. But I would add to that there are many different ways in which clinical research happens. And I think it's very important for us to also consider research strategies that are designed to take these approved medicines and take the effective medicines and make them as well tolerated as possible, as straightforward as possible, so they can be used in the broadest group of patients as possible. And so supporting research that helps us optimize drug delivery, drug dosing, patient tolerability is also a very high priority, and something that is very much informed by our patients, our patient advocates, and really reflects the way we can communicate together and work as a team together to really get us to the best possible place.
Thank you all so much for watching. We hope that you appreciate the importance of dose optimization for improved quality of life and outcomes for those diagnosed with breast cancer. If you want to learn more about this topic from the patient perspective, check out the blog we linked below. Don't forget to sign up for reminders to breast cancer breakthroughs. We've linked the homepage below. And be sure to like and subscribe to this channel to catch more episodes. And finally, if you enjoyed today's episode, please take 2 minutes to fill out our short survey that we linked in the description below.